One of my favorite client engagements that really helped to shape this new approach that I'm bringing is from a role that I had. My purpose was to come into a team that had about 4 different online platforms that were driving conversion, in addition to 3 different social media platforms, and to look across all of them and try to answer the question, how well are we doing? What does performance mean? What numbers do we want to look for? What opportunities exist to help strengthen these platforms? And what does that look like in the future? This particular team was focused on driving hires at Microsoft. Their goal was to attract the top talent and then to get them into their application process. This was one of my favorite experiences because it really drove home the concept of what I call digital ecosystem performance. When we are creating brand experiences, it's never just one digital platform for any brand these days. There are multiple. But what's also true is your audience experiences it all at once. So it's really common for brands to have their social team, maybe their e-commerce site team, and then there's another team that's working on the blog. And all of these really have to talk to one another and be very clear and distinct for the user. But by very nature of the way businesses are structured and the way work needs to get done, it becomes separate people working on them. And sometimes that can create a bit of a bifurcated experience. What I loved about this particular role is it's called single goal mini platforms. And it's a fundamental tenet of the approach that I bring to digital. And again, it goes back to the idea of, at the end of the day, we are all trying to answer the same question. We're trying to get our customers to say yes. And as brands, we create these digital platforms for our audience to connect and to learn about us and to start building a relationship with what we're trying to offer. And of course, we're also trying to convert. So the question became, which numbers do we pay attention to and which don't we? And I really love this question, and here's why. We all love measurability. I love measurability. But the whole premise that ties back to my underlying approach and philosophy is that it's a human being on the other side of the screen making the decision about whether or not to click. There is a human element behind that conversion. And if we look only at numbers, if there's a huge performance story that needs to be told that we're missing out on, instead of just the obvious of visits and views and bounce rate, we really started to look closer at what's the time on site? What's the average number of pages an individual is visiting? Different numbers that are more, that speak more toward what is the performance story, and are we, from a product adoption perspective, are we driving a better experience for them? For example, we were trying to find an empirical way to gauge the degree of performance on our social platforms. So of course we have the obvious numbers such as growth rate of audience and number of shares and likes, the obvious ones. How well are we winning hearts and minds? And can we see that by looking at numbers? And, for example, we were toying with the idea of, measuring sentiment across our platforms. And I love the concept, but one of the things that we kept going back to and recognizing that, again, you have to really understand the use case and the problem set. we would get a hand, like everyone else on the web, there's a handful of internet trolls who would make, silly comments. Do we count it? Do we not? Some of the sentiment, like more negative sentiment, would also come by way of different cultures from the US. And what we started to find too, and I've actually found this as we've gone on with other platforms, is other cultures have very different ideas about what is and is not okay to post online. So there's a degree to which you just want to be thinking about all of the factors.